This video segment involves turnaround strategy, and one of the best examples I can think of to use in illuminating a successful turnaround strategy is that of Firestone tires in the earlier part of this millennium. Turnaround strategies, as you'll recall from your readings, are a multi-step process. To put some context behind this for Firestone, back in mid-2000, Firestone had a number of tires blow up or otherwise disintegrate on Ford Explorers. Some Explorers were rolling over, and there was a lot of debate between Firestone and Ford at the time whose fault it was, but I think when it came down to the public perception, it was both of them's fault. Wrong tire for the wrong design of car, and it really wasn't taken care of very well at the time. There were a number of accidents, a number of deaths, a number of injury, and a whole lot of lawsuits that went along with this. Firestone was basically dead in the water at that point, and no one ever thought they'd rebound from such a tragedy. In a turnaround strategy, as you'll probably recall, there are two steps, really. The turnaround strategy is restoring profitability to a firm that's in a real mess, whatever that mess may be. The first step in any turnaround strategy, whether it be Sony or whether it be Firestone, is that of contraction. And another way of saying contraction is you've got to stop the bleeding, you've got to stop the pain, you've got to stop the flow of red ink from the organization in order to put a tourniquet on it and help revive the organization. You've just got to stop whatever is wrong. And how do companies do this? Well, first of all, they're probably going to have to raise cash to turn themselves around from a very unfortunate situation. And cash often comes from, if they're available, if they're diversified, divestitures. They can also come through retrenchment, which may be laying off people or closing down facilities for a period of time. And almost always it involves, or should involve, the replacement of the top management team who was in charge of the organization at the time that these issues came to the fore. This is not to finger point. From an organizational or strategic standpoint, it's usually a good idea, and it's a necessary idea to do this because you're sending a very loud message to all stakeholders involved that you mean business and you're going to right whatever wrong there was. And this often includes, or needs to include, the removal of managers who were at the helm when the company became terribly distressed. The second step, once this bleeding is stopped and management has been replaced, is probably even more difficult, because then you're in a consolidation phase where you have to restore profitability to the firm. And this is a very difficult thing to do from an organization that's being sued to death or otherwise paying out lots of money to right whatever wrongs it has done. And Firestone did. They were certainly involved with that. How do they do this? First and foremost, they have to retool their wares, whether it be through innovation, research and development, product extension, acquisition, related diversification. They have to show the public they have something different than that which they had before that might have gotten them into this trouble. And these include image enhancements, not the least of which is public relations, but they need to show the public at large that this organization has changed in a wholesale fashion, and the products or services that they now offer are of high quality, and the image is really raised. Very difficult strategy to effect. Let's take the first step of a turnaround strategy and put it in the context of Firestone as it was looking at its business in August of 2000. Now, at this time, they voluntarily recalled all of their tires, and Ford was in trouble. Both CEOs had to go in front of a congressional hearing and state their point of view about why what happened. This is part of the puzzle of a turnaround strategy. First things first. Contraction to stop the bleeding. First of all, there were some divestitures made on behalf of Firestone. Now, I should go back just for a moment and say Firestone is a brand of Bridgestone, so it's a Bridgestone-Firestone problem. And they started a series of divestitures where they sold off parts of their business. In particular, there was quite a large amount of cash raised through the sale of a Bridgestone holding and measuring equipment to a Japanese manufacturer. Actually, Bridgestone is a Japanese manufacturer then and today still. As far as retrenchment goes, indeed, what Firestone or Bridgestone had to do was shutter some of their operations in order to save money to pay for the matters at hand, the lawsuits, the legal proceedings, how to right the ship. And of the many things they did is they underwent layoffs and they closed and reduced some of their production facilities, as you see here on the screen. And then when it comes to replacing the CEO, indeed, let's see, 4 months after the original recall, the president and CEO of Firestone stepped down, announced his retirement, which is kind of a veiled way, implicitly at least, of saying resignation. What's interesting to note is that shortly thereafter, Ford Motor Company, also in quite a bit of trouble for its part in this travesty with the Ford Explorer, was that they fired their CEO, who wouldn't go quietly, in 2000, about a year after the fact of when the Bridgestone CEO stepped down. So these are all things that actually Firestone did, and I'm stealing my thunder here by telling you that Firestone is one of the few companies I've ever seen effect a turnaround strategy successfully in a very short period of time, and they did. And they went through, in the first year, they went through these steps of divestiture, retrenchment, and replacing CEOs. The second step, as I alluded to earlier, and the more difficult step, is consolidation, or now restoring the company to profitability, being in that you have stopped all the loss of red ink, and they had. How do you do this, though? It's a very difficult thing to do. You have to retool, you have to regroup, you have to re-innovate. You have to show the public at large that you have a enhanced product that they can trust. And in tires, this is a very, very difficult thing to do. One of the things that Firestone did was that they regrouped and they gained momentum with what they call their Run Flat Tire series. And you can see here some of the things that, or technology-wise, that go into the Run Flat tires. But one of the important things they did with this tire is they gained the support of BMW, and this became the mainstay tire for one of BMW's new cars at the time. So this helped prove that the innovation and R&D was worthwhile. In addition to this new tire and maybe the image enhancement of being, taken by BMW and sold on all of its particular line of cars, was that not too terribly long after a J.D. Power report came out, an organization in which ranks different companies in terms of quality, but for tires on this graph that you can see here, which comes from the J.D. Power website. Of course, Michelin is always their top-notch tire, but Bridgestone made a very strong comeback. You can see on this slide where overall satisfaction, Bridgestone second only to Michelin. The tire ride second only to Michelin. The same is true for traction and handling, wearability, and appearance. So the durability of the tire was increased greatly. And this happened, in a very short order of time by late 2002. So when the 2002 annual report is released, and it's released in 2003, the new CEO is very happy to report the following. Now note two things on here. One, this is a European edition of their annual report. And number two, this is a European edition of an annual report because Japanese companies don't have to file annual reports in the United States by law. So they did file one in the European Union, and that's where this comes from. What's most important on here is that the CEO and, more importantly, the organization is happy to report now that, where the arrow indicates, this American subsidiary of Bridgestone, the Bridgestone Firestone Tire Organization or unit, has been restored to profitability, and indeed they were out of the red and into the black in 2002. This was reported in 2003. And then furthermore, it goes on to say that U.S. retail sales of Firestone tires are growing again. This is an example of a very effective and very quick turnaround strategy.